New York's housing courts punish landlords with what some call inefficiency and uncertainty in housing hell. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today. And once again, it's coming out of the great state of New York. And I talk all the time about all of the inefficiencies and uncertainty in housing court up in New York State, okay? And the problem is that the process can be dragged on for so long that it costs landlords thousands upon thousands of dollars in lost rent, property damage, and court costs in order to remove a bad tenant. And that's not the way it should be, okay? It should be that the court system is efficient, removes the tenants who are not paying rent, and that way the landlord's able to get their property back and get it re-rented so that we're not facing tens of thousands of dollars worth of losses. But it's the exact opposite of that, and it's horrible to hear the situations, especially that small mom and pop landlords go through in order to get their own property back, okay? The court system automatically takes the tenant's side, and then of course they're providing free lawyers to these tenants who are just wanting to stay in these units for free for as long as possible, okay? Now, in my mind, that's theft, okay? It is theft from the landlord who ends up, just taking this extreme loss, and a lot of the times it puts these landlords out of business, or it forces the landlords into a position where, hey, we are taking an extreme financial loss, and that shouldn't be the way that things operate. But hey, that's the way their system is set up there, and I want to bring this story to you today because you know what? We need to shine a spotlight onto it, okay? When I have a tenant who stops paying me rent here in Omaha, Nebraska, I'm able to get that tenant up out of there relatively quickly, get my unit back, and then still deal with, the property damage and the lost rent, but it's a much, much smaller loss. But when a property owner in New York has the same situation, it can be months, if not years, in order to get that tenant out. In fact, some landlords realize that, hey, it's cheaper if I just pay the tenant to leave. And that could be another thousands of dollars. Thousands of dollars, it is cheaper to pay that tenant to leave rather than sit there and try to go through the court system. That means your system, your court system is a failure. It is a 100% fail if you have to pay out of pocket to get a tenant who didn't pay you rent to leave. Give me a break, okay? We're talking about the failure of the housing court system within New York State. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. Do you think that the court system up in New York State is a failure? The housing court system, I'm sorry. Let's not talk about the other court systems, okay? The criminal court system, they have their own issues, okay? This is a landlord issue I'm talking about today, okay? And do you believe it's a failure? Do you think that it is unconstitutional and just plain wrong that it could take months, if not years, in order to remove a tenant who is not paying rent? I do, okay? I think that it is absolutely a unconstitutional taking of private property for public use without just compensation when the court system is so backlogged, when useless motions can be filed, when it is easily proven that these people are totally in the wrong and they are allowed to stay for that much longer. Okay, it's wrong. It's wrong. Anyway, let me get into this article. It has an interesting perspective on the whole situation. This article is coming from cityjournal.org, and it says, New York's housing hell. Instead of punishing landlords with inefficiency and uncertainty, housing courts should provide for a fair, predictable, and timely eviction process. And I absolutely agree. And you take away those things, and you just have a system where the bad actors, the tenants who are just going to take advantage of the situation, that's exactly what they do. They take advantage, and we end up with landlords who don't want to even rent their properties anymore. Anyway, let's get into this article and see what it says. This article, I'm sorry, I already said that. Landlord-tenant issues may be a fact of life in New York City, but they usually don't make national news. In recent months, however, Americans have read about squatters in the city taking up residence in quiet residential neighborhoods, tenants refusing to pay rent for years on end, and even police arresting landlords for exercising their property rights. These glimpses into hellish New York housing situations have challenged conventional narratives of predatory landlords and powerless tenants. The reality is much different, as former Chief Judge Colleen McMahon in the Southern District of New York wrote. Evicting a tenant, especially a residential tenant in New York, is a slow, cumbersome, and extremely tenant-favorable process, especially when compared to analogous procedures in other states. And yeah, she's absolutely right, okay? And this is what I've been highlighting for a long time. I have more videos than I can count just about the ridiculous housing laws and housing courts up in New York. Not just New York City, but New York State too, okay? And as the city goes, the whole state is just awful for landlords, okay? So, you know, like I've mentioned many times before, they have created a system where the small mom and pop landlord can't win. They cannot win. And many have tried, you know, they've like, okay, well, there's exceptions here so that we don't have to fall under the rent control, or we don't have to fall under these certain eviction protections. But slowly they're whittling away at all of those exceptions, okay? And eventually it will come to the fact that everyone, not just within New York City, but within the state of New York, will be under rent control or rent stabilization, whatever the heck you want to call it. Everyone will be facing these good cause eviction protections. Everyone will have to go through, extreme court process to remove any tenant for any reason other than what's given on what the government says, okay? Basically, your property rights will be taken away from you. Not only that, but you're going to pay out the butt for these properties, right? Pay a ton of property taxes and then be villainized, treated as though you are just the most evil person on the face of the earth. And what profit are you going to get? Maybe some appreciation at some point in time. You probably won't make much off of the rental income, but you might make a little bit off of the appreciation 10, 20 years down the line. So you're going to wait 10 or 20 years to make that money. Yeah, there's better ways to go about doing things. There are better ways to go about doing things. I'd rather just put my money in the stock market than deal with that kind of nonsense, you know? So I'm just saying, right? Being a landlord in New York State, man, it is not a thing that you should take lightly, okay? You shouldn't just jump into it if you think, we're moving out of our old place and we're getting a new place. Maybe we should turn our old place into a rental. Think again. It might just be better to sell the place to an owner-occupant. And if you are insistent upon becoming a landlord, do it with intentionality outside of New York State. Legal services, attorneys, and tenant advocates are also a fixture of housing courts, providing information and advice to those facing evictions. Tenants earning up to 200% of the federal poverty line have the right to an attorney in eviction proceedings under a Universal Access to Counsel program, passed in 2017 by Mayor Bill de Blasio. These specialist attorneys increase their clients' leverage through procedural delays. For example, requests to the court compel landlords to produce extra documents or ask the court to provide tenants with relief, such as rescheduling a missed court appearance. Facing monthly operational and financial costs, landlords capitulate to expediency and offer tenant settlements, including forgiving rents or even offering cash payouts for promises to vacate, an arrangement known as cash for keys. Landlords know that it's often better to pay to remove a problem tenant than to endure the uncertainty and delay of the tenant-friendly housing court system. Yep, that's exactly what I just talked about. It's easier to pay the tenant to leave rather than deal with the housing court, okay? And I can't blame you if you write it into your numbers, you're able to get that tenant up out of there, you will save thousands of dollars and tons of headaches. if you do it. So I can't blame you if you're already in a situation where you're a landlord in New York and you want to get rid of a problem tenant. It's oftentimes cheaper to go that method or go use that method. Okay, so yeah. Despite their titles, the 50 presiding officials in housing courts are not judges under the state constitution. Instead, they are lawyers deemed qualified by a 14-member Housing Court Advisory Council composed of representatives of various interest groups, the mayor, and the commissioner of the state's Department of Housing and Community Renewal. In practice, nominees frequently come from the ranks of legal services attorneys, another reason why tenants routinely get the benefit of the doubt. After appointment by the administrative judge for the civil court, housing court judges serve for renewable 5-year terms. See, and that's something I didn't know, okay? So housing court judges aren't judges in a traditional manner up in New York, right? They're appointed, and they're appointed from the ranks of the very attorneys who are fighting against landlords in housing court cases. So yeah, that no wonder these processes get dragged out so well, okay? But let me continue because, this is kind of a long article. Squatters dwell a few circles lower in the New York housing netherworld. Over the past several months, stories of trespassers living in vacant housing units have drawn national attention, sometimes for tragic reasons. Consider Nadia Vitale, who in March traveled from Spain to arrange her late mother's Kips Bay apartment in anticipation of a friend's stay. She opened the door to find a pair of squatters living there. The duo allegedly killed her, stuffed her corpse in a duffel bag, and placed the bag in a closet. According to law enforcement sources, the pair fled to Pennsylvania using Vitale's Lexus SUV, and after running up bills on her credit cards, got caught after crashing the vehicle outside of Harrisburg. In late May, a 21-year-old Venezuelan migrant squatting in a vacant Bronx apartment building allegedly shot and killed 2 longtime residents after an altercation. The squatter had been arrested previously at least 6 times for robbery and gun charges, including for crimes purportedly committed while riding on a moped. So yeah, I covered the story about the lady who got killed by the squatters, and you know what? All of this stuff, right, could easily be solved if the police would treat squatters as though they are the criminals that they truly are. Okay, this isn't a civil matter. Oh man. And you know what, it's frustrating hearing about the victims of these crimes. Okay, now I'm not saying that these bad people wouldn't have existed, right? But maybe they would have been a little bit more deterred squatting in that house if they had known that, oh yeah, the police could come in here and arrest me at any point in time. Okay, the property owner could easily have me arrested, so I'm not going to, try squatting. But you know what? The law was changed because of these high-profile incidents that were happening. Man, this is a really, really good article, and I'm going to skip down a little bit in it, and I can't go through the whole thing because this would be an hour-long video, right? But the main point is that landlords in New York in particular, right, and other anti-landlord places. I mean, we could talk about New Jersey, we could talk about California, we could talk about Washington State, we could talk about any of these places where they have all of these rules and restrictions and, basically villainizing the landlords and treating us like garbage, right? It just isn't worth operating there. It isn't, okay? And you know what? I know a lot of landlords have left. They've left because they were getting treated like garbage by the state, even though, we're putting our money into the state. And they were like, well, we're not getting anything back for it. Small landlords face the most serious risks. These owners cannot average the cost of bad faith tenants over a large portfolio. 1 or 2 can cause financial ruin. Small landlords usually depend heavily on rental cash flows to pay the mortgage, sometimes for a house they live in. They thus have a financial incentive to get along with their tenants, lest they put their investment or their own dwelling in jeopardy. Owner-occupant landlords bear the additional risk of living with someone they loathe or even fear. New York's laws prevent landlords from being choosy in the tenant selection process. For example, source of income discrimination laws prohibit landlords from excluding those seeking to pay rent through housing vouchers. Only owner occupants in 1 and 2 family homes are exempt. New York State's 2019 Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act further prohibits landlords from denying rental applications because of past landlord-tenant actions or summary judgments. So yeah, they're tying your hands on who you can select as a tenant. And believe me, it's not just them trying to ban landlords from refusing people who have Section 8 vouchers, right? It's also them saying, oh, we don't want you to reject somebody who has a low credit score. We don't want you to reject somebody who has a criminal history. We don't want, they basically are going to end up getting landlords destroyed financially, okay? Because they're going to force you to take bad tenants. It just doesn't make any sense. So yeah, I'm going to put a link to this article in the description below. I want you to read the whole thing. It's a really actually well written one, and it's pretty long. That's the only reason I won't cover the whole thing today. This video is already longer than my normal videos, but I think you should get the gist of it, okay?